Hey everybody, welcome back. I am Bowen Belmer. This is episode 8 of Float on Air. Hard to believe we're at episode 8 already. Time has been really flying by. As always in this episode, Nick Rogers and I dive into the history of flight, typically through the lens of airships, but we also cover other topics as well related to airplanes and aerospace. In this episode, we pick up where we left off last episode, and it brings us all the way up to right before World War One. So we're talking about the airship pioneers leading up to the airships that will ultimately be used during the First World War. It's a really good episode. Nick brings so much knowledge to the table as he always does. We have a couple of updates with Float and also a new segment that we ended up doing where Nick and I take a look at some photos from the time periods that we're talking about that we used AI to enhance, colorize, and take a look at, what a modern day photograph from that time period would look like. So it's very cool. It's a great episode. Stick around, and we appreciate you being here. Cue the music.
For over 200 years, we have chased the sky. Gravity has tested us, but it has never defeated us. You're listening to Float on Air. Lift off, float on.
If you're listening to this, you already heard the intro. So, Nick, how are you doing? You are fresh off of a trip to southern Italy.
That's it. I'm very good. Well, apart from you listeners may be able to hear, I've got a bit of a cold, so apologies for being a bit croaky. But yep, I was in southern Italy seeing Pompeii, Herculaneum, Sicily, the temple at Segesta, lots of archaeological wonders. And, we have some old things in Britain, but seeing Pompeii, an entire Roman city, is quite the thing. It really is as impactful as you'd think it was. So it was a great trip. How have you been?
That's awesome. I'm good. We have no old things here. The old things here are, well, I shouldn't say no old things. South America has many old things. The United States has very few old things by comparison. That's actually something that's so lost on Americans, by the way, is that when things are considered old here, they might only be like 300 years old, as opposed to like thousands by you guys, which is one of my favorite parts of getting out to your half of the world, or I guess maybe third of the world, more
Yeah,
accurate.
our little corner here. But we take it totally for granted. Like, I've lived in villages before that have had a church that's 1,000 years old. And you're like, yeah, it's
And
just
no
a
one
church.
cares. They're just like, yeah, it's
It
the church.
is what it is.
That's funny. Yeah, humans are funny that way, aren't they? Yeah, we're goofy, but no, we're good. We let me think. On float side, not a ton of news, although I did see the initial cut of the docu-series episode 1, and it's pretty good. Yeah, it's a good. The first episode is affectionately titled "You Have to Start Somewhere," which is
Yeah.
which is true. You have to start somewhere. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming out probably in the next week or so, realistically. And yeah, we'll be working on the next couple. I know engineering team is hard at work with design elements, and the goal is to have. I believe Ryan's words in the first episode are something that flies in 2026, but ideally the ability to use some of our technology to pick up something even as small as like a 2 liter bottle and fly it across, an auditorium or something like this. Basically, something where we can take our ideas and put them, into the real world, even at a small scale. So that's, what's being worked on right now.
You have to do that, don't you? See how the technology reacts to real life conditions, even at a small level.
Exactly right. So we will see, where that gets us in the meantime. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. So transitioning
one big
to
question
oh,
I
go
have
ahead.
actually before we get into history, do you have desks yet?
Yes, we do have desks. I believe everyone who's currently in office does have a desk currently.
There you go. That's progress.
Although there are new, we're out there still hiring too. So if you are a an aerospace engineer, and or a actually, I should let Ryan speak to this part. I don't want to put out of order like who exactly we're looking for at the moment, but I know there are some needs specifically on the engineering side and the science side, like material science and things like this. So get in touch if you're somebody who is interested in working with Float. We're certainly expanding. But yes, everyone to my knowledge has a desk currently, and I think built it themselves. I think that we're holding true to that at least right
Oh,
now.
fantastic!
So
That was the sort of sign-on task, wasn't it?
yeah, exactly. I got a new chair since we last recorded, so now
Well, there
I'm
you
one of those people that has like a full back chair, and I can sit here and never leave, which is great. Um, Actually, this was a Facebook Marketplace find, which was a huge pickup. I'm a huge fan of Facebook Marketplace. Anyone who knows me in real life will know that I have bought and sold an embarrassing number of things
go.
on Facebook Marketplace across like 5 states that we've lived in. So
Anything for a bargain.
yeah, exactly. It's like a digital yard sale, and people will have like a garage sale. Is that a thing in the UK? Will people have
Yeah,
garage sales or like yard
not
sales?
we have we call them car boot sales. I don't know if you have the same thing where people come
Mm-mm.
drive all their cars into a field and sell stuff out of the trunk.
Out of the
Is that what
trunk?
you do?
No, we
Yeah.
don't do it quite like that. I like that though. Here it'll be like a neighborhood and somebody will have their garage open with a bunch of tables in the driveway and it's all just their stuff basically. Which it's less common today than it maybe was, like when I was a kid. But I was such a sucker for a good garage sale as a kid. I would like ride my bike to other neighborhoods and stuff to kind of just poke around and see what they
See
had.
what people are selling. Yeah.
And Facebook Marketplace is basically that online, actually, now that I think about it. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of where things stand at the moment. Where are we, Nick, in the timeline of history? We should be just encroaching on the First War, if I remember correctly.
We are, and I thought what we could do. It's almost like I'm holding back from the actual war because it's so horrible. But I thought what we could do is look at basically the state of military airships just up to the very outbreak of the war, because
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
different countries are doing some different things. Um, we're going to look at Britain, France, and Germany, briefly Italy as well. And a heads up, there's some superb facial hair to come.
Oh, let's go. Okay. I have
And
Google images ready.
in fact, we start with I think one of the best moustaches in aviation history, a guy called Colonel James Templar, who was a British balloonist in the sort of late 19th century. He had a superb moustache, and he was he was he was basically the boss of British ballooning. He set up the School of Ballooning. He was given command of the School of Ballooning in the late 1800s, and he was responsible for starting British military ballooning training, early crews, and this was to do sort of observation and reconnaissance of. That's actually him in later life. He had an even better moustache when he was
Let me
slightly
find
younger.
it. This picture, not to cut you off, this looks like Shane Gillis became a. Do you know who Shane Gillis is?
No, I don't. Who's that?
Oh, okay, that might be just an American reference. He's a comedian over here in the States, but he's very famous for his impersonations of Donald Trump. Um, and and he kind of to me looks like this guy. If Shane Gillis was
Oh yeah,
hang on.
I do know who this guy is. Yeah, no. If he became a an early Victorian balloonist, he might look like that.
This is if Shane Gillis was a colonel in the British military in the turn of the century. Sorry, there'll be like 5 Americans that appreciate that.
Yeah, that's uncanny.
If you haven't seen him play Trump, though, it's pretty hysterical. Oh no,
Oh
wait,
yeah,
that's not him.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
not. Wait, hang on. That's not the right picture. This his impersonation is just hilarious. That's him as Donald Trump. His vocally, it's like uncanny. It's amazing. Anyway, okay, sorry. Keep going. Let me find a younger picture of Colonel James Templar.
So he it, he had a bit of an unfortunate incident three years or so into his command of the School of Ballooning, he was going up in a balloon with two Conservative Party members of Parliament, our equivalent of Congress representatives, I guess. A guy called Mr. Ag Gardner and a guy called Walter Powell. And they set off from Bath, which is in the west of sort of southwest of England. There you go. Fabulous stuff.
You
Yeah. Well, they call them soup strainers, don't they? So that's definitely
yeah,
strained as cockaliki soup, I think.
fair enough.
So
Okay, I've cut you off enough times. I'm sorry, Nick.
no. So the three of them, Colonel Templar, Mr. Ag Gardner, Walter Powell, they set off from Bath in southwest England in a balloon for a basically little jaunt. Effectively, they were just going to he was going to show these conservative politicians what it was like to fly in a balloon. This would have been a gas balloon, and they were headed sort of south, and Templar saw the English Channel coming up, and he thought, well, I don't really want to go that far, so let's land. So he landed the balloon, and he got out to secure it, to like peg it down so it wasn't going to go anywhere. And as he got out, the balloon went up a little bit, just a little bit, and one of these Conservative politicians seems to have been quite spooked by this, Mr. Ag Gardner. He jumped out. He got frightened and jumped out. And in jumping, he broke his leg. But what happened was that the balloon was then lightened. The other politician, Walter Powell, hesitated for just a little bit too long. The balloon went up. It was blown south into the channel, and neither it nor Walter Powell MP was ever seen again.
No way.
So he basically killed this member of Parliament in his balloon.
Holy crap. We really are straying away from the no deaths in airships. Holy.
We are. Did my
That's crazy. You cut out just for a second there, but I got you back.
yeah, that was it.
Holy crap! Hang on. Is this the right ship, Nick? This one?
No. So this would have been This is actually, we're gonna. I think if I can see that correctly, we might be talking about this next. But
Okay,
this would have been
that's fine.
This would have been a balloon.
In the meantime, that is crazy. And was there any? Do you know? Was there any criminal charges or anything like that?
No. He carried on in command of the School of Ballooning.
Man, back then you could just disappear a member of parliament and nothing happened. I mean, it's an accident, obviously, but still, it's like, oh my god.
But because this is just a little anecdote told in obscure histories. We don't know what his response is. We don't know if he felt guilty or what if anything happened to him. It's crazy. There would have been a special election, I suppose.
That's crazy. And so they just never found the guy or the balloon. They just see somewhere in the ocean, presumably.
And actually, this isn't going to be the only time in this episode that we have an airship disappear without trace. And it's also not, I don't think it's the only time in this series that we've had an airship disappear.
No, it's the second time already.
Yeah.
Here, this is a depiction that I just found of the events. I believe this is actually the right one. This is a depiction that I just found.
There you go. That's it.
It was like a balloon headed towards the channel.
There they go. Well, there he goes.
Wow. What a way to go out. It's worth twice. I mean, it probably wasn't pleasant, but we're talking about it.
Well, yeah, we're not going to. I mean, we know more about him for that than we do about his political career. So,
Do you think there's another podcast on the planet that has ever discussed this story before? I'm guessing no. I think we were probably the first people to talk about this story on a podcast. And for that,
well, I think
you're welcome.
It's a story that deserves to be told.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many of these I feel that way about. And I know you and I have definitely talked about this off air before, but just the amount of interesting stories that have come out of the airship industry for being such a niche industry that not enough people pay attention to. It is amazing to me because there's so many of these stories that we've probably talked about a dozen stories that could be movies easily.
Yeah, I know, and you keep coming across these stories in Airships. You think, why haven't this? Apart from anything else, they're so visually striking, and you've got such weird characters, and they do such strange things. You think, Hollywood should be all over it, but there are a few
Yeah,
Airship
why is there
movies
not
not
a
apparently.
cat like Pixar movie about what's the cat's name? I'm already forgetting. Jeez, terrible.
Kiddo. Is it Kiddo?
Kiddo. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I'm
actually,
already picturing a Pixar movie just called Kiddo. It's about the cat
his
on the
whole life.
airship.
There is a an airship in Pixar's Up.
That's true. Up's a great movie. That counts as airship lore. I agree.
I love that film. It's one of my favorite films. But yes, so there was no, as far as I'm aware, no blowback on Colonel Templar. He carried on doing his thing. And he, maybe because of, I don't know, maybe because of this incident, he thought that having a craft that you could steer was probably a good idea. So he lobbied quite hard for airships. He met Alberto Santos Dumont, someone we've mentioned a number of times on this show before. And eventually he got the War Office to support the building of an actual airship. And the airship that emerged from this was called the Nully Secundus, and it was a semi-rigid airship. And by the time that it was ready to go, Colonel Templar had been replaced by a guy called Colonel Kappa. I'm not sure about his facial hair, to be honest with you. And then they flew. He flew with Samuel Cody, of all people, great American cowboy, who
What? Say that again, Nick. You cut out just for a second. Who was it?
Samuel Cody, the American cowboy,
Oh, okay.
who also became an aviation pioneer. And again, this weird world of airship characters, this American cowboy became the first man to fly an aeroplane in Britain. But before he did that, October 1907, he was flying this Nully Secundus airship over London. And although it was quite a spectacle, and many people turned out to see it, ultimately the airship was a failure. Like all these early airships, or so many of them, it couldn't make its way back against the wind. So it's if you can only have an airship that can fly with the wind, it's there's no point. It's useless. So it
And
was
yet these guys jumped in them and were like, "Yeah, no problem. Let's fly."
off we
Amazing.
go.
Amazing.
So that although it got enlarged and refashioned into a bigger ship, it wasn't a success and ultimately got scrapped. But the British War Office was now kind of on board with the idea of airships, and they had a few different goes at doing it. They built a series of their own small little non-rigid airships, one of which one of my favorite names is called Baby, which I think is such a
Just
cute little name
baby.
for Baby, little sort of fat 25-meter long airship called Baby. They built their own series of airships, and they, again, a bit of a weird situation. They had two French built airships almost forced on them. They didn't really want them, but a group of politicians basically said, "Oh, you've got to buy this French airship because it'll be good for us to have different types of airships." And that one was bought, was given to the I think the army, but they couldn't use it because they didn't have a hangar big enough to put it in.
Mhm.
It was useless. And then a newspaper, in a sort of patriotic flush, if you like, bought them another French airship. This was used a few times, but it was a complete disaster. And on its last flight, it burst its envelope. It fell onto some houses in a town called Farnborough, not too far from where I am now. Caused £4,000 worth of damage, which the government refused to pay, and that was the end of of that airship. But the British military had thought about this quite a lot, and they realized that the future for airships in a military sense probably wasn't going to be in the strategic sense with these little airships, but rather with bigger, rigid airships with big range that could act as naval scouts. And this, of course, is at a time where the Royal Navy is the largest and the largest navy in the world, and probably one of the most innovative organizations in the world as well. Like if you go back to the 19th and early 20th century, the Royal Navy was basically the tech company of its day, so far ahead in technology and manufacturing processes. They're always looking for what the next thing might be. So they end up.
I never really looked at it that way, but it totally makes sense that they would be like the tech pioneers because they're the only ones who have access to the capital and resources to build the stuff. Well, and I've always heard this actually. I know we're still pre-war, but one of the things historians don't totally agree on is why exactly World War One happened. And I've always heard people say that, well, we built all this technology, we have to go try it somewhere as like a potential if nothing else, like gasoline to the fire. Like probably not standalone, obviously the only reason, but like gasoline to the fire of, a period of time where all of this basically all the technological advancements were coming out of the military. And so it was like, well,
Mm.
now what?
Yeah, and that sparked arms races. Basically, there was a naval arms race between Britain and Germany, and as we'll see later in this episode, there was an airship arms race between Germany and France. So yeah, you're right. There's all this technology, and one side is seeing what the other's doing and thinking, well, we now have a gap that we need to fill because we can't let them get the get the upper hand. And this is what the British had done. They'd thought about what the Germans might do. They realized that Zeppelins would, strategic bombers. There'd be because of their great range, and therefore they'd be effective naval scouts. And they saw the potential for rigid airships as being able to effectively expand the reach of the Royal Navy. So they commissioned the first British rigid airship from a company called Vickers, which was a very famous British basically military manufacturer of World War One and into World War Two. And the airship was called. I think this name sounds pure science fiction, but His Majesty's Airship Number One. It sounds like something from some comic book where the British Empire is in space, conquering other planets. But they commissioned this, and I always used to think of this airship, which they nicknamed the Mayfly, because mayflies only live for one day, and it wasn't ultimately very successful. I always thought it was maybe a failure, but I think it's more of a noble failure because it was very far-sighted for the time, and this would have been completed in 1911. It was designed as a scout. It had the big revolution, I guess, was that it was equipped with wireless communications because of its role as a scout. And it was built by Vickers, who their major expertise at this time was submarines, which isn't a million miles away from the kind of physics you need to think about airships. They're both sort of buoyant craft, if you like, just in different medium. So this airship initially rolled out in May 1911, but it was massively overweight and needed a lot of basically major surgery to get it sorted out. Yep, that's it there. So actually, you can see there, running underneath, you've got a triangular keel, and in the middle you've got a little passenger cabin, and that's where the wireless equipment was housed. And another thing that was innovative about this airship is the first one that had mooring equipment on the nose, so it could connect to a mooring mast and carried its own mooring equipment. So it was quite innovative. So but they needed to save a lot of weight, and they went to some drastic measures, fatally drastic measures, to achieve this. They were so desperate at one point that they drilled holes in the engine levers, as in the things you operate to change the speed of the engine, because it would save some weight. But one of the things they did was they took out that triangular keel to save weight, and that proved to be the kind of undoing of it, because when they took it back out of the shed, September 1911, it was struck by a gust of wind. They heard this weird cracking from inside, and then the airship's back broke, and the stern of it went up, the bow of it settled, and it was the end of it. They tried to drag it back into the shed, but they just damaged it even more, and it was ultimately scrapped, which is a shame. Yeah, there you go. So you're not coming back from that, I don't think.
Oh, what a bummer it must have been. Also,
Well,
side note, I would rather get on one of these airships than get on a submarine. Just as a side note.
I I haven't been on a submarine in out in the sea. I've been on a few submarines, that are museum ships or whatever. I don't really like the idea of it, to be honest.
Yeah, no way. I'm like incredibly out on deep ocean. I mean, like, I shouldn't say that. I think the deep ocean is astonishingly interesting. Like, I think it is so incredibly alien to us land dwellers, and it's a shame it's not more deeply, no pun intended, explored. Um, but it freaks me out. Like that submersible from a couple years ago that those guys
Oh,
went on and then
yeah.
it like imploded. Like that is my worst nightmare. Although it happens so fast that it's probably like you would just be dead before you even knew it happened, where an airship crashing or going missing in the English Channel would probably be a much slower drawn out process.
Plenty of time to contemplate your mortality when you're Walter Powell
Yeah,
MP drifting in a
yeah, maybe I'm
balloon.
wrong about this might be a bad take actually. Maybe the submarine's a better way to go if you got to do it.
Well, it's funny. One of my other things I'm working on at the moment is a show about the Titanic, and I've been a Titanic nerd since I was a young boy, since before I've been an airship nerd actually, and I've often wondered, would I like to go down to the wreck if I could afford it? And I just think I don't, even in a a better designed submersible, I just don't think I would want to do it. I think I would freak out, quite frankly, at the idea of what
Yeah,
was around me.
I don't think I could do that. It would be cool. Like, I definitely understand why people do it and like why they want to do it. I would probably be more willing to go to space than I would be to do that,
Right.
which sounds
Oh,
insane, but I would be more likely, I think, to do that if those were my two options.
I'm 100% up for going to space. And actually, I'm wearing my Artemis T-shirt
I
because,
was
as we
about to
record,
say,
I'm so looking forward to that.
yeah,
I'm
on the day we're recording for those listening, Artemis 2 is scheduled to launch this evening in about 4 hours from right now. To do a journey around the moon. They keep saying a journey to the moon. It's a little bit misleading. They're not going on the moon. They're circling the moon and coming back. So just want to put it out there. For all of you moon landing deniers, of which there are many, they're not. They're still not landing on it this time. So
no,
I don't
yeah,
know.
it still
I
hasn't
don't know.
happened.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, that I keep wondering, did you go see Project Hail Mary yet?
Not yet, but it is on my
Okay,
list. Apparently, it's
it's
quite good.
fantastic.
Is
It
it? Oh,
is.
wow.
So I've read the book. The book is amazing. I took the wife to see the movie this past weekend. It was fantastic. And I am usually one that does not like film adaptations of books. Like I usually think they miss. I mean, obviously they miss detail. Like they're always going
Yeah.
to. It's too hard to cram it all in. They did a really good job with this one, in my opinion. But
Cool.
I was wondering if they timed this mission or if the movie launch timed their launch with the mission because it's just like so incredibly timely and everything on like the Twitter timeline right now is either Artemis or Project Hail Mary.
Yeah, yeah, it's all sort of converging, isn't it? I'm very jealous of my friend Eric in Orlando, who is driving out to watch it this evening. So
Nice.
I wish I could be there. I mean, I've seen rocket launches from the parking lot of a Publix before, but never actually been out to the Cape. But that would be amazing to see that.
Yeah, I haven't seen one live either, but it's on the list. Yeah, so we'll see. Hopefully all goes well.
Yes, exactly. Um, so yeah, so that was kind of back to the history. That was you know 1911, the end of British rigid airships for a while, but and I think kind of you get the sense of the Admiralty going backwards and forwards about what they want to do. They sent officers to Germany on basically on fact finding trips where they flew on one of the Zeppelin airline ships. They flew on a couple of Zeppelin competitor ships, and they basically came back and said, "Guys, we're well behind. We need to catch up. We need to get back in the race." They ordered a couple of two like small foreign built ships, and then they ordered another rigid airship to be built, but that didn't come into service until November 1916. So well into the war itself. So Britain at the beginning of the war was significantly lacking behind Germany and France, but as we'll see, they catch up during the war in a very, very quick, very, very specific, and very, very effective way. We won't go into that now. We'll go into that in a different episode. And it really is it is a very British triumph of basically muddling through and cobbling something together, and it works. It just works. We'll talk about that on another episode.
Put a pin in it.
Yes, exactly. Or don't put a pin in the airship because you lose gas.
That's true.
But you've
Rigid airship.
yes. So briefly, we need to talk about 1911, which saw a war between Italy and the Ottoman Empire in North Africa, and this is just worthy of touching on briefly because it's the first time and the only time before World War One that airships were ever actually used in action against the military. This was the Italo-Turkish War, fought in Northern Africa, and it was a nasty little war. It had trench warfare. It had new technology, lots of airplane reconnaissance flights for the first time, world's first aeroplane bombing missions, and it had two semi-rigid airships. The Italians loved semi-rigid airships, dropping bombs and doing reconnaissance flights over the Turkish positions in North Africa. They dropped bombs from 6,000 feet. There's a photograph somewhere of this happening. It's incredible that they did this. So Italy, although their fleet was really quite small, they were the only people at the outbreak of World War One to have actually tested airship technology in action, and it's telling. I think they used it for both bombing and for reconnaissance as well. So that's Italy now and Britain, but the biggest of the countries that were involved in airships were France and Germany, and France obviously was the first company to get in on airships. Henri Giffard back in 1852. And they also got in fairly early on military airships as well. The first French Army airships was built by sugar refiners, actually, called the Lebaudy brothers, who built some very distinctive sort of semi-rigid airships in the early years of the 20th century. Have you ever seen, there's a Disney film called The Island at the Top of the World? It's a 1974 live action film.
It's from Disney?
It's Disney. And it's one to add to your list because it's actually quite quite a good film. It's quite charming, it's quite exciting, but it's about this mission this exploration mission in an airship called the Hyperion, and it looks very similar. It's obviously based on these airships that the Labaudy brothers were building. And if you go to Disneyland Paris, in I think it's next to their version of Space Mountain, there's I think it's like a cafe, and it has the airship, or at least half of the airship, built into the side of this cafe. And I didn't know it was there. We went December 24, and I was there with them. I was like, look, my God, there's an airship, which I didn't expect to see. But that's it. Very very distinctive looking airships. But they built the French army commissioned one called La Patrie, the nation, launched in 1906, and it had short but reasonably successful career through 1907. It carried the French prime minister, but I mentioned that this wasn't going to be the first time we had an airship drifting off into the horizon, never to be seen again. This happened to this airship. November 1907, ripped from her moorings in a storm and carried off to the northwest from Verdun in France. Nothing seen of her for 2 days, and then it was spotted off the coast of Wales. Then it briefly touched down in Ireland and then lifted back off again. And the last time it was seen was in the Mull of Kintyre in Scotland, heading out west, never to.
It just broke free, or it was being restrained.
Fortunately, no one in there. It broke free and then just drifted away.
I mean, it is fortunate in the sense that no one perished, but extremely unfortunate in the sense that it wasn't even a planned flight. It just like completely broke free on its own. Crazy.
But France, I guess France at this time, again, like Germany, is the only country you describe as having an airship industry, because it wasn't just one company doing it, or wasn't just in Britain, it was just the military dabbling. In France, you had several companies who were building airships. So Labaudy brothers, you had a company called Zodiac, who built the only French rigid airship to ever be built, 1913. It's called Space, after SPEISS, after the engineer who designed it. Had a wooden frame, which was quite innovative, but it was overweight. It flew several times, and it just didn't work, and it was scrapped. You had Astra Torres, who were building these weird, like, trilobe airships that are quite distinctive. And you had a company called Clement Bayard, who were building, also building their own airships. And they made the first crossing of the Channel from France to Britain. So France was doing a lot with airships. They wanted a fleet. They definitely wanted a fleet. But my reading of it is that they weren't quite sure why. And it goes back to what actually you were saying earlier about technology and arms races. They were doing it because Germany was doing it. They were locked in this aerial arms race.
It's like, we should have this. Why? I don't know. Because they're.
Well, I don't know. What are we going to do with it?
So yeah, they want it, so we should have it too.
Yeah,
or
that's
better.
Exactly right. And they didn't think about rigid airships so much, because their concern was the border with Germany. So if you're looking to patrol a border or something, I guess they thought, well, you don't really need an airship that can fly for hours and hours and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. So they didn't really focus on non-rigid or on rigids. They focused on semi-rigids and rigids. But they were locked in this aerial arms race with Germany, and not surprisingly, it was Germany that really held the upper hand in this. They'd been doing this for not quite as long as the French, but they'd gone hard into airships. And we talk about Count von Zeppelin. He wasn't the only guy in town. His big rival was a chap called Major August von Parseval. Facial hair, yes, but nothing noteworthy, unfortunately. And he developed the idea of the kite balloon. And we've talked about balloons being used for observations. He developed a balloon that was shaped a bit like an airship, which meant it was more stable as a platform. And then he took that the next step forward, which was as a steerable kite balloon. And then he started to build these small but quite good non-rigid airships, and he would sell them to the militaries around the world. So yes, Germany, but also Britain, Austria, Russia, Turkey, even Japan bought one. There you go. That's a Parsifal kite balloon, and these were used. These were used all through World War One. They were used for artillery spotting by mostly by the Germans, and they were filled with hydrogen, and they became quite popular targets for Allied airplane pilots. And
That makes sense.
yeah, the pilots of these balloons were equipped with parachutes, and they could jump out. It must have been pretty horrendous being in one of those and seeing a fighter plane shooting at you, and then this enormous sort of ball of hydrogen explodes right.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's like a fireball. Yeah. Oh my
Not
goodness, that's
fun.
insane.
But as with, I mean, again, all Germany in particular was an autocratic country. You had Kaiser Wilhelm very much at the top of this quite militaristic society, and he was a very military-minded guy. He was very interested in the navy, and he became very interested in airships and how they might be used in future wars. And this led to his interest, sparked a big debate between the German high command about what's best: rigid, non-rigid, semi-rigid. And they ended up in 1909 having definitely the first German, I think probably the world's first military airship maneuvers. They had two non-rigids, a semi-rigid, and a Zeppelin participate in these maneuvers.
As like a test.
Yeah, exactly. As like a test to see what they could do. And it ended up, I think this must have been wonderful, but it ended up with like this aerial parade over Cologne Cathedral, over the skies over
That would be
Cologne.
cool. I'm trying to imagine if we had like aircraft companies today coming together and doing like live testing that people could watch to see, which one makes the most sense.
Yes. And
Now
seeing
everything's done so covertly. Maybe that's one of the
yeah.
things that we're missing out on today because of like the internet and information ability to transfer information all the way across the world, as everything has to be done so covertly.
Yes, everything's done. People don't want to telegraph what they're doing with these experimental things. But
Yeah.
seeing multiple airships in the skies together must have always been an amazing thing. It happened. It happened a bit. Was it this year? No, last year I think was the 100th anniversary of the Goodyear blimp, and they did a few flights together with several of their airships. And I think back in the 90s there was an airship race, I want to say in New York City, with several skyships, which would have been so cool to have seen.
Great.
But we get back to Zeppelin, who they weren't the only builder of rigid airships in Germany. If you think back to the LZ-4, which was the miracle at Echterding and the outpouring of funds that the German people gave to Count von Zeppelin. In the aftermath of that, another German engineer teamed up with an industrialist and formed a company called Schutter Lanz, and they built some quite innovative, quite forward-thinking rigid airships, which had like this geodesic wooden plywood frame, which would go, and they would go on to build a series of these that would be used by the German army and the German navy. Again, in future episodes, we'll come back to this, but it was the plywood that would be the undoing of that ultimately. But a lot of
I think just by the way that like a lot of the science to make this viable commercially just didn't exist yet. Like in the biggest push of airships, which is essentially the time period that we're not talking about, I would say, in terms of like most people and most resources allocated at one time relatively to airships, they just didn't have the material science.
No, they didn't. And they are they're designing. It's all very empirical. It's trial and error. try one thing, it doesn't work, try another thing. And we'll actually see that this was Count von Zeppelin's approach. He was very, very conservative and cautious and empirical, and he wouldn't depart from things unless they'd been tried and tested many, many times. And that probably held him back in some ways. But again, as we'll see, the necessity of the war massively accelerated what the Zeppelins did, and also the need to share technology during the war as well.
Yeah.
But we always end up coming back to the Zeppelin company. And up to the outbreak of World War One, Zeppelin would build 16 airships for the German military, and the airline that they ran was a training school for German military pilots. But one of the most important things that happened before the war was in April 1913, an airship LZ-1616 had to make a forced landing in thick fog. And basically, to the commander's horror, he found out that he'd landed in France instead of Germany, which was a major diplomatic incident. And the French took complete advantage of this. They basically shepherded the Germans off the airship. They got their designers to go over every inch of that airship, copy down everything they could, and they ended up being able to have very, very detailed blueprints of this airship, which they shared with the British, and that became the basis of the British rigid airships of the First World War.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting. So it's technically like stolen tech or borrowed tech at the very least.
Bit of industrial espionage, I suppose. And apparently, when the German crew went back onto the airship, the French had left rude graffiti all over it, so they weren't very happy about that. But you had we're now coming to our second top facial hair of the episode. Most of these German military Zeppelins have been done for the army, but we've seen the British realize that it was actually with the Navy that their biggest contribution could be made. But the head of the German Navy is a guy called Alfred von Tirpitz, and he's got some pretty astounding facial hair. He was very conservative and distrustful of spending money on basically anything that's new or innovative or that might move the German Navy away from its core mission of ships and surface combat. But because of the Kaiser being so supportive, and there you go. It's like Neptune or someone.
It's so crazy to me that this was considered like stylish at the time, probably.
Oh yeah. The
guy's got 2 beards. Crazy.
And I want the thought process of someone who looks in the mirror and says, "Yeah, that's what I want to do." The 2 beard thing. Why not?
Yeah, and that was just, people were probably jealous. People were probably like, "I want 2 beards when I grow up."
Yes, Admiral von Tirpitz is a healthy, virile man with his 2 beards.
This one actually looks pretty epic.
He's got the he's got the expression you expect from a World
he
War
just
I
looks
German
pissed
admiral.
off.
Yeah.
He just looks mad, like this guy. See if I can find a picture of him smiling. No, but yeah, here we go. Oh yeah. What is this facial expression? What
he's looking at his trident. I mean, to me, that's a very cultivated image that he has there. That's not accidental, I don't think.
This guy has never smiled ever.
No, and he'd be mortified if you suggested it.
He'd be like, "Yeah, in this picture," or no, maybe this one's better. They were like, "Smile," and he's like, "I am."
I am smiling.
Yeah, amazing. Incredible, uniform though.
Something else we've lost, I think, the uniforms. But so yes, Admiral von Tirpitz, very grumpy, very conservative, but he had to eventually. His hand was forced, and the German Navy took 3 ships ultimately before the war, but with actually pretty horrendous consequences. The first one was lost in a storm in September 1913. Then the second one had some success, but on the 10th flight, it was this special flight. It had a whole bunch of people from the Zeppelin company. It had pretty much every officer in the German Naval Airship Division on it, and it caught fire and exploded and killed every single person on board. So the German Naval Airship Division found itself with no airships and no trained officers. They got another guy in called Peter Strasser, who kind of steadied the nerves. He's a big character we'll come on to in the war, and he sort of added some continuity, and they took delivery of the L3. And I always find this quite poignant, because the first flight of the L3 was in May 1914. And then in June 1914, it took part in something called Kiel Week, which was a long-running joint naval exercise between Britain and Germany. This was at the end of June 1914, and there were a bit like a NATO exercise that we'd have now. They do mock war games and that sort of thing. There's lots of in the evenings, there's lots of parties. The British and German officers drinking together, having fun, having a laugh. But whilst this was going on, and L3 flying overhead, news came of the assassination in Sarajevo of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, and his wife. And it's this event that really started the dominoes falling that would lead to the last domino, 4th of August, Britain declaring war on Germany and a general war breaking out across Europe. And the Zeppelin airline airships were immediately taken over by the military. The crews literally took their uniforms off, took out their military uniforms and put them on, and they were now in the German armed forces.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And that's it. And I feel like from now, airships go from being quite sort of cutesy, amateur, bit of a laugh, unless you're on one of the ones that doesn't have a happy ending, but they go into something more professional, more production line, and ultimately a little bit darker as we get into World War One.
Well, that was a fantastic, as always, precursor to what comes next, which, I think that from what I know from you and just in general, that this does seem like the next turning point, right? Like it's we have the period of, is this even possible, which was maybe 2 decades before this or 3 decades before this. We have, okay, it's possible, and now it's just a bunch of rich guys toying around with it, to, okay, we can build a company or some type of industry around this, to this is a ultimate.
Yes,
or
it's a weapon, and we're going to kill people with it.
Yeah, and now we're back to unweaponizing, trying to bring airships back to their former glory of not being strictly used, as weaponry or as aids to weaponry. But anyway, very interesting. Looking forward to diving into the war itself and everything that entails. Transitioning here, Nick. Sorry, was there anything else on the history this week?
No, I think that's it. We'll dive into the war in future episodes, and there's lots to talk about.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to it, definitely, and I will be aiding now going forward in some of the research. Because I understand that some of this stuff is uncharted, I think, for you as well. Like, I'm sure it's stuff that but haven't maybe covered in like a formal capacity.
Yeah,
is that right?
This is it. Like the real deep dives into it. My podcast kind of stopped at this point. I say stopped. Season 1 stopped. I'm going to pick it up.
Yeah.
Paused. But I haven't yet done the deep dive into the war.
Well, absolutely. I'll be doing it with you. I know that you said, so this week, Nick actually came to the table with a new segment, I guess is a good way of framing it, which is great because looking at news, there was not a whole lot of airship news. I mean, there hasn't been in a little while, although, if we broaden it to just aerospace in general, obviously, we did touch on this already. Artemis 2 is the biggest thing going right now, so everyone should definitely check that out. By the time you're listening to this, it will have already happened, or there will be in their mission at the very least. But go back and watch the launch if you didn't watch it live. So, Nick, tell us about what you were telling me, what you were going to show, and we can talk about it.
Well, I guess it's just a little bit of show and tell, really. I was playing around with ChatGPT, and the idea of colorizing photographs is not exactly new. But I was taking some old pictures of airships, and I told ChatGPT to turn them into modern color DSLR style crisp aviation pictures, and the result was in some of the cases was really quite cool. And I'll see if I can share. There we go. Can we see that slideshow?
Yes.
So here we have a picture of the Hindenburg, sort of sepia, typical 1930s, and then brought to life
Whoa.
with the use of AI. I think it adds a lot more texture to it.
Yeah. I mean, I am used to only seeing it in black and white photos. I mean, all of this stuff. So it is very interesting. Yeah.
We have the Hindenburg over New York City. This was just moments, I say moments, hours before it touched down at Lakehurst, New Jersey, not a million miles away from you, Bo, and then exploded. And here again, I feel like this just brings it really vividly to life, to be what it would be like to have seen this fly over. The Graf Zeppelin, my favorite airship. Another one here.
Wait, go
This
back
was
to
on.
that one. Sorry, go back to that one. Sorry, to get the people as well. Yeah,
I'm not
it is
sure where
really.
this was. And then more Graf Zeppelin, and this was on its flight to the Arctic Circle, touching down on water. This one I love. So this is the Graf Zeppelin flying over the pyramids of Giza, and like if you look a bit closely, the ChatGPT hasn't done the best job with the airship, but it really does. You kind of get the idea.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
British
this is what
are
we always talk about. It's like we we need more spectacles, you
mm,
know? We just so
yes,
much of this is lost in terms of like real life experiences, like really experiencing something in front of your own eyes that's like gives you the feeling of wonder and just like, oh, how is that possible? Like how
yeah.
is that happening?
Looking up and
Um,
thinking, "My God, that's cool."
yeah, yes, literally just as something simple as that, as seeing something and just being like, wow, that is so cool. I've never seen anything like that before.
This is the
Yeah, these are
R1.
amazing.
This is actually this isn't. This looks like smoke. It's water ballast. It's not smoke. This was the. This is going to be a major story when we come onto it. But the British Imperial Airship Scheme. You had two organisations. One run by the government. One run by a private company, competing for effectively a government mission to build an airship that could link the British Empire. So Canada, Australia, India, South Africa, places like that. And you had the R100, which was the private company airship that managed to cross the Atlantic to Canada, and the R101, which became one of the worst airship disasters in history. But we'll come on to that later. And then this one I rather like. This is the very first Zeppelin,
Whoa.
and then one of the very last.
Yeah, that's crazy. How insane that must have been.
There you go.
Pretty soon, you could probably do it already. You could probably take that and plug it into Zora and get like colorized video of it as well. Have you ever seen there's an excellent film called They Shall Not Grow Old. Have you ever seen it? It's a what year did that come out? Came out in 2018 and it is a documentary about World War One, but it's using original footage. Like it's using as much original footage as possible from the war, and then they re-finished all of it. Like they recolorized it. They remade. Yeah, you should definitely watch this if you haven't. They re did like a lot of the sounds of the day. Like they would like have an artillery shell and then they would record the sound of a real one and kind of plug it in. So it was basically like as close as you could get at the time of like seeing what it was actually like. And what's crazy is this was back in 2018. I remember I saw this in a theater with my father. Now I can only imagine they could remake this type of thing way better with like modern AI. Because I mean, we didn't have large language models back then, at least not like we do now. Um, Maybe I'll have to revisit this movie. I'm wondering if they have airships make an appearance and I just don't remember.
It might. Does it tell the whole of the war, or is it just the American story of the war?
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to remember. Um, it's created using footage of the First World War held by the British Imperial War Museum, most of which was previously unseen. Yeah, so I don't think it's just the American
No, that sounds
perspective.
like the whole war.
Yeah, I think I honestly it's been like almost a decade because I saw it when it first came out, so 2018. It's been like 8 years already. I don't remember. I would have to revisit this, but I
Oh,
just you made me think of it when you were talking about the recolorization of the photos and kind of getting a modern look at these events.
it's directed by Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings fame.
Yeah, yeah, it was really well done. You should definitely check this out. I
I
will
had,
probably
yeah,
revisit it as well because I cannot remember if they cover airships at all.
that
But
sounds
I
good.
feel like they probably did at some capacity, but maybe I'm wrong. Um, Either way, that type of thing would be great to see more of this related to the airship industry.
Absolutely agree. And
One thing that's
also,
great about that film that I do remember is a lot of the original footage. You can tell that the guys they don't know how to be on camera. Like just the idea of being on camera is so foreign to them that they kind of all freeze up and are like, like they don't know how to interact with it and they're all like staring directly at it the whole time and it's
yeah.
very interesting because like they haven't even seen a film before, most of them, let alone being on one.
Well,
Maybe they've
it's
seen film, but they certainly haven't been on one.
no, they haven't been on one, but it's insane, really, how long that lasts. And you have politicians, even in the sort of 1950s, who are not terribly comfortable with being on camera, who still don't quite understand how you do television. I suppose it wasn't until later that became more of a thing as people understood the medium.
Yeah. Well, and it just wouldn't have been, it was just so new, Like it's so, I'm sure there'll be stuff like that in the AI world that like a decade or more, now we're talking about 100 years. 100 years from now, people are going to be like, can you believe that they use ChatGPT to colorize images? It's going to be
Yeah.
like some a whole new, yeah, it's crazy to think about. Anyway, yeah, little tidbit for everybody. But no, that was cool. That was a cool exercise thing. Thank you for doing that. I like it.
No, my pleasure.
Well, that was pretty much all I had for this week. Excellent as always. We will keep everyone updated with regard to the float news. I know it's been the big move was obviously moving in person and having your engineering team really starting in person. And pretty soon here we will have the very first episode of docu-series coming out. It is, everyone just remember, we are not filmmakers and
Yeah,
we are
that's not mine, anyway, so yeah.
simultaneously yeah, we are simultaneously starting a brand new airship company and doing our best to capture it. And so it is certainly some aspects of it are a little amateurish, but that's part of the charm. That's part of why we're doing it the way that we're doing it. So
Well,
you'll see what I
I'm
mean.
very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and thank you for joining as always, Nick. Really appreciate your expertise and your research. It is always fantastic.
Always a
You're the
pleasure.
foremost airship scholar that I am aware of. So
Well, thank you very much. I stand on the shoulders of giants.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
You're listening to Float on Air. Lift off, float on.